This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to answer the question, is Bitcoin a bubble, or is Bitcoin in a bubble? This is a question that I've been getting a lot recently, so I wanted to address it. One of the chief proponents of this idea is Peter Schiff, who compares the Bitcoin rise in price to the Dutch tulip mania that happened 400 years ago. In this latest tweet, he's talking about how he thinks that maybe Bitcoin could go down the history books as an even bigger bubble. He also recently talked about how he thinks there might be a double top forming in Bitcoin since we're back up to the all-time highs. We're very close to the all-time highs, which were approximately at 20,000. Now, this would be more impressive and more intellectually honest if Peter Schiff hadn't been saying that Bitcoin was in a bubble for the last 11 years. Here's Peter Schiff on CNBC comparing Bitcoin to tulips and calling it a bubble when Bitcoin was at $375 per Bitcoin. This is back in December of 2013, and he's been maintaining that Bitcoin is in a bubble ever since then. If Bitcoin falls 30 or 40%, he says, look, it was in a bubble, but he never tweets about how it goes up 500% after that. And so he's a fairly dishonest person, but I think an interesting way of approaching this would be to look at other cases of quote-unquote bubbles and see what happened and use that as a template for approaching Bitcoin. So Amazon, this was one that I lived through in the late 90s. It IPO'd at a split adjusted price of approximately $2, $2.50, went all the way up to the approximately 110, and then collapsed in the bear market of 2000 to 2002. Everyone said the bubble was over. And then a funny thing happened on the way to Amazon's bankruptcy. In fact, it obviously never filed for bankruptcy. We can see here that approximately 2009, 2010 looks like October 2009, Amazon began to hit new all-time highs again. So it makes sense if you have a bubble, something goes up, it crashes almost back to where it started or back to where it started. But when a few years later it's back up at that price, I think all honest intellectual observers need to ask themselves, what happened to this bubble? Why did this bubble fail? Now, if we scroll out and look at the Amazon's price trading history since then, we can see that the bubble is right here. It's barely visible on the chart. There's still people who are saying Amazon's in a bubble. They've been saying it. I remember when we had this drawdown, people said that the Amazon bubble had burst, and yet even just a couple months ago we were hitting new all-time highs in Amazon. So this is how I would approach it. I would say if something goes up a lot, crashes, but then comes back to those previous highs, you may need to revise your thesis. The same thing has been happening with California housing for many, many years. Here is the famous housing bubble, really from 2002, that burst in 2008 and sort of bottomed in around 2010. This is the price index of San Francisco homes. I'm not sure if this covers the whole Bay Area or just the San Francisco county or city, but we can see here it peaked in 2007, 2006, and collapsed back down. And yet, what has happened since then? Since then, we've gone on to hit new highs. And so something very similar happened with Los Angeles. It looks like almost even a bigger boom and bust in that same period of the housing bubble. And then incomes adjusted upwards, and we recovered to new all-time highs with the Los Angeles price index as well. And so people who keep saying that California is has a housing bubble, I've certainly been hearing that since the late 80s. Nice places are usually expensive. Nice things usually cost a lot of money. Now, Bitcoin is in a very similar position. We can look at the great bubble of 2013 to 2000, really burst by the end of 2015, when Bitcoin really went from a price of approximately $20 a share up to almost $1,200 a share before coming crashing back down. Didn't come all the way back down, came down to about 152. But if we scroll back out and see the price history since then, here is that 2013, 2014 bubble. And we can see that ever since then, we recovered in, call it 2017. We went on to really 10x or 20x from that previous high. We traded almost to 20,000. This is on the Bitstamp exchange. And then we crashed again. This was another bursting of a quote-unquote bubble, which Peter Schiff and many other people talked about. But then if we scroll out and look, this is 2020 right here. This is where we're trading. We had the highest monthly close ever in November. A lot of people don't realize that when Bitcoin spiked in late 2017, it didn't spend very many days even above 15,000. Whereas this time we've spent quite a few days above 15,000, and we had the highest monthly close in history. And so we have this strange situation where we had a bubble, we crashed, we recovered to new highs. Same thing appears to be happening now. So what I would suggest is that people think of this in terms of the great philosopher Karl Popper, who talked about falsification, and that if you have something that is not cannot be falsifiable, it may not be a true scientific hypothesis. And I think the same thing applies to investment hypotheses. A good investment hypothesis is always falsifiable. At what point will I know that I'm wrong? If you're trading, you'll have a stop loss. You don't need to really intellectually justify this, but if you're a longer term investor in something, you need to have an idea of when you know you're wrong, especially if you're short something. If you were short Amazon, there was no point being short that entire time and being stubborn, though I'm sure there are people who tried. So one thing I always ask Bitcoin bears is, what would you have to see to change your mind? And I never get a good answer. There's always a lot of cognitive dissonance that sets in, because there are a lot of people who are Bitcoin bears who are just going to be Bitcoin bears for the rest of their lives. But I would say in relation to the bubble argument, if you say something that's is in a bubble because it goes up a lot in price and then collapses, isn't it intellectually honest if you revise your hypothesis when it's back at those highs just a couple years later? Right now we have Bitcoin. We have huge institutional flows going into it from Wall Street, from high net worth investors, from corporations like MicroStrategy, from billionaires or 20 or 30 billionaires who have purchased Bitcoin. And yet there's still people like Peter Schiff who say that it's in a bubble. But I think it's intellectually dishonest. And I think you do yourself a real investment disservice if when something gets back to its new bubble highs, as Amazon did, as California housing always seems to do, if you stay stubborn and call it a bubble when it's back up there. I don't think it's being intellectually honest. The sad truth is that people like Peter Schiff will continue to say that Bitcoin's in a bubble as it hits new highs above 20K, 50K, 100K, 500,000, a million, etc., which is where I'd expect it to go over the next 4 years. Now, Peter Schiff, I think he's a smart guy, actually. I don't think he's dumb. So I'm forced to conclude, really, that he's a dishonest person who's sort of riding along on the Bitcoin train and getting a lot of Twitter traffic by constantly attacking Bitcoin. And this probably drums up service for his gold company. But he's really hurt a lot of people by steering them away from Bitcoin. And he shows zero intellectual curiosity, zero remorse for his previous terrible predictions. So I would suggest that these are smart guys: Peter Schiff, Paul Krugman, who's a Keynesian, Nouriel Roubini, who predicted a housing bubble once. These are smart guys, but if you listen to them about Bitcoin and you just blindly parrot what they're saying, you're really going to miss out in the same way that many people missed out on buying a house and making money from it. Many people missed out on Amazon as well. And I think Peter Schiff, I don't expect him to ever come around. I love this meme. I'm going to keep putting it up here. Bitcoin at $1, gold was at 1,700. Bitcoin at 10,000 earlier this year, gold was still at 1,700. Now gold's at 1,800, but we can imagine a scenario. I do expect gold to go up more than this, but we can certainly imagine a scenario where Peter Schiff is very old, Bitcoins in the 100,000s or the millions, he's still calling it a bubble, and gold will have certainly not kept up. Please forward this video to those of your friends, especially over a certain age, who just blindly listen to these people and keep saying that Bitcoin is in a bubble. I don't think it's an intellectually honest way to approach the data. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.